order the Budget Committee meeting number 1. If I could have a roll call, please.
Mr. Riddle,
Present.
Mr. McBride, Miss Hannah,
Yes.
Miss Gonzalez,
Yes.
Miss Fabian,
Present.
Miss Lindsay,
President.
Present.
President Ewing.
Here. So we do have a quorum. This is our Budget Committee meeting number 1. This is the first one. This budget will change based on conversations, feedback, and other items. The point of tonight's meeting is to kind of give a broad overview, introduce the concepts, themes to the board. However, we will have another meeting on, I guess, the first Tuesday in June, right, Ms. Polk? Okay, so what we'll do tonight is turn it over to Ms. Polk. She'll walk us through, take questions, maybe write down your questions as you go. Then we'll have a Q&A at the end, and then it kind of gives time for the board members to be able to digest the information. And then we'll come back and have another meeting in June. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Polk.
Good evening, board president, board members, colleagues, community. It is yet another time that we're presenting the budget for the upcoming year.
I'm sorry, Ms.
been-
Polk. You want to bring the mic
Yes.
down? Thank you.
I thought I could talk loud.
You can.
It is yet another year that we've started the budget process, and a lot of hard work from across the district, from board members, superintendent, colleagues, and community members have worked extremely hard to put this information together to present to you tonight. We have in this deck tonight the ISB budget request, which is also included in the budget presentation. So I won't go over that one item there because it's included in the presentation. Also, the evidence-based funding, that's also included in the presentation, but that abstract is there for your leisure to look at. Workers' compensation, we've included information from ECS, which is our employment claim service company, so that you can look at that as well. If you have questions about it, please feel free to forward those to us, and we'll make sure that we forward them to HR for risk management. We've also included in the presentation the historical information related to the district's financial profile. That's also in the presentation, so we'll talk through that a little bit more. And we wanted you to see your document for the last official audit. So we've included that comprehensive document there for your awareness. That's the document that is often submitted forward to ASBO International as well as to GASB so that we can get our awards, and we typically get them based upon that document. We wanted you to see it.
Is it?
Yeah, it's about the agenda.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Polk, could you, the 2024 ISB budget request.
Yes.
Could you explain that?
Yes, that information is going to be in the presentation that we have. We just wanted you to see that those pullouts will be incorporated in the presentation that we'll go over, and I'll explain it a little further, unless you want me to do it now.
No.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. And so now if you would, Mr. Lee, if you would open up the presentation. Thank you. Next slide, please. Rather than to read, the directions that we've been given from the superintendent, we'll lend an opportunity for her to say something if she would like to do so.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming to our budget meeting. What we looked at as we budgeted across the district was how that we could utilize our funds to support all our divisions across our district, and ensuring that when we're utilizing our funds, we're not duplicating services in a sense of spending money in one division and buying the same item in a different division. But how could divisions collaborate and support one another in their endeavors to make the money go longer and further to touch the classrooms? And so as each division built out their budgets, they collaborated to see if somebody needed, give me an example. Professional development, we'll use one, and we can use de-escalation, and maybe we were looking at how principals could utilize the professional development of de-escalation at one school. If we chose to go with the vendor, what would that price be to support 3 schools in that endeavor instead of just one? Or in the FACE department, if there were certain activities or events, how could they pair with the bilingual department who also has activities for parents within their department so that those funds can go further. And so what you will see is a lot of cross-referencing of departments so that they're not working in silos, so that we can further ensure that our money is going deeper, wider, and across across our district to support our children. Thank you, Ms. Pope.
Thank you.
And I'd like to add one more thing.
Yes.
And we also, as you know, we went to the SBB model a few months ago, and we also allowed for principals to look at their budgets, look at their data, look at their needs within their schools, collaborate with their teachers to come up with a budget and a plan that would support their school improvement plan, which will support student achievement within their schools. So you're also going to see that each school has a footprint on this plan on what would be tailored for their school and would support the endeavors and the initiatives that they have going on within their school community. I also want to apologize for being late. I was dealing with something in my office.
Thank you, Superintendent. Next slide, please. The superintendent touched on this, which is transparency, equity, sustainability, and return on investment. Those are the 4 pillars that we utilize in implementing the strategic budget process. Next slide, please. The goals is to stabilize the budget without jeopardizing the educational opportunities of our students, to fund strategically with priorities, and the superintendent touched on that as well. We know that in our district we're not getting enough money from the state. That's why we're Tier 1. So we prioritize our spending to address the greatest needs first. Not that those other things go away, but rather they're unfunded. So in the event that we get additional money like we did with the ESSER money, we don't have to think very hard. We go to what we've already planned and identified. And then consistent processing and policies. And that's evident by the recent policies that have come forth to the board, which is directly linked to the priorities of the district. Next slide, please. So why are we here? First and foremost, directive of the board, directive of the superintendent to our office. And I just want to read this because I want to make sure that I'm saying it very clearly. Strategic budgeting, inclusive of site-based budgeting, inherently solicits and incorporates input from all stakeholders in the district's prioritization of needs and allocation of resources, resulting in the greatest return on investment. And so every quarter, there's a report that typically comes to our office when we meet with the principals to say, what's the greatest returns that we're getting, and, what's the best bang for the bucks that's being spent. And so that's what we've done over the years. The key emphasis and ultimate goal is to positively affect student achievement, which is just saying another way what the superintendent said earlier. Next slide, please. This is another way of showing collaboration with the community internally and prioritization and sustainability. Because we don't look at the budget for the current year only. We look at 3 years out. Will we be able to sustain the initiatives that we're starting? Next slide. With this, it's very important that compliance, and I wanted to show this because oftentimes, that's kind of in the backdrop, right? But it's very important that we're compliant with the source of funds that we're spending. So solvency, compliance, transparency, inclusivity, equity-based, but more importantly, needs-focused. And that's how all of the pieces come together with what we're presenting to you tonight. Any questions so far? Next slide, please. We had a budget development committee, which is comprised of two board members, board president and Ms. Hannah. We had that on April the 21st. The superintendent also was in attendance. We had other district leadership present, grant managers, parents, and community members who were all a part of that most important presentation of the proposed budget. And our narrator, moderator, for that meeting was Mr. Marvin Brimbury. He has helped us over the last year or two and making sure that the discussions are in order and focused. And so we believe that he did an excellent job this year as he has in the past few years. Next slide, please. We've included a little excerpt of his bio for your leisure. Next slide, please. Mr. Lattimore, if you want to come up and talk about the survey.
Thank you, Ms. Polk. Good evening, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the board, staff members here, and community members that are here and at home. We were asked to conduct a survey, Ms. Polk, specifically to get community input. What are we going to do, or what do you feel your priorities should be for FY24? This kind of follows a model we've used for the ESSER program. Very simply, we ran a Google form. We had it out for 2 weeks. We received 241 responses. Those represent students, parents, teachers, administrators, both quantitatively, and I'll talk about that in a second, as well as qualitatively. We have qualitative comments. The comments essentially reflect similar to what we've gotten in the ESSER programs. For your review there, you can see the categories under just above the numbers, just above the line says respondents. As an example, diverse learners, social emotional, technology, etc. Of the 241 respondents, I'll take you to the line that says respondent rankings. 112 ranked school safety as a number 2 priority. 115 of the 241 ranked academics as an area they think we should look at as our top priority for funding for the FY24 budget. And our third highest ranking item was compensation with respect to stipends or raising wages. And you can see the respective numbers and the respective placement in the last line where it says overall survey rankings. This was our way of getting feedback from the community to determine what they thought we should be doing for the forthcoming FY24 fiscal year. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
And as I spoke at the budget committee meeting, that 241 respondents to this survey is not representative of our district. And I just want to say that publicly.
Okay.
And for, I don't know how I feel about the budget being devised based around 241 respondents. Mm-hmm. I mean, even though it is moving forward, but I am not pleased with that number of respondents for our budget
Right.
development?
We kept it out for 2 weeks. So it was 2 weeks, I believe, from the 13th through the 26th or 27th, if I remember correctly. The numbers dropped a little bit from our first ESSER survey, which was 765, down to 241. But we offer people the opportunity. And we look also at the email listings to ensure we don't get somebody trying to pack the box, if you would. We only had one duplicate, and you could see the party started, got interrupted, and came back in.
Yeah, maybe it needs to be kind of an ongoing survey up to the point of the budget development.
Okay.
You know, and starting it earlier so that, you know, we may get more respondents.
Yeah, we started a month early, so you can see by the date. Yes, ma'am.
Do you want to go ahead first?
Yeah, I also had a question. For looking at the results, it is a little surprising at people's rankings, but I think what also kind of surprised me is that for diverse learners and English language learners, that somehow falls away from academics. I don't know how we can separate the resources when it is for academics for those students that just have different needs. And so that was my comment, but my question is, out of the 241, are we going to get the breakdown of who those people were?
Yes, we can give you that.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank
because that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I wanted to just address why we separated them.
Mm-hmm.
When we get evidence-based funding, it's in 4 pillars.
Mm-hmm.
It's special ed, low income, ELL, and general population. And so we mirrored that in creating the survey.
The survey. Thank you, Ms. Polk.
Yeah, so to echo Ms. Hannah's point, because I had written that down as well, we're in a community of 100,000. I know the last census put us at 80, like the high 80s, but realistically we're probably 100,000. So 241 is not even a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
I wonder if we've looked at different ways to engage the community. And I'm actually curious on how community members were engaged, not just parents, for the survey. But we do need to better engage the community and look at all of the different ways we can. And to Ms. Hannah's point, maybe we look at the events that are really engaging for them and use those as reminders of, hey, we have this ongoing budget assessment. Can you fill out that survey?
Okay. We'll take that, ma'am. Thank you. Ms. Poe.
One of the things I also want to mention is that that's the reason why we have 3 budget workshops.
Right.
So that they can also participate and provide input through these meetings. So we have the committee, we have the development committee, which is the initial, and then we have 3 budget workshops, which is publicized, and they're able to also provide input at that time.
So for the community members, let's say our business owners that live here locally, or those that aren't, they don't have kids that come to the school system, how are we engaging them?
Well, I mean, this is publicized. The committee, this meeting here, we have 3 of them.
Right.
And they're able to attend this meeting. They're also able to communicate via email. They can call our office, because our budget, once that is developed, it has to be on public display for 30 days. And we have to put it in the newspaper.
Right.
And if anyone has any questions, they can come in and ask us at that time as well. That's why we always do it early. We don't wait. We have to get the budget adopted by the end of September, but we never wait until then, because if there's any snafus, we have time to present it and make those revisions.
Perfect. I'm just wondering if maybe we can get some feedback from, or ideas from the community, which we need to increase this 241. So if we could probably brainstorm, or people can send in suggestions on how we can be more proactive and not just, we put it up, it's on you to go find it. I'm not saying that's
Yeah,
what
I
it
get
was,
it. I
but
get
just
it.
in case.
I get it.
I appreciate Ms. Polk. Thank you.
Also, it was on our webpage too, so Mr. Alajak has made sure it was prominent on our webpage. So when you open up the webpage for that time frame, first thing you saw was that.
My point is more that our community members aren't necessarily going to the
Oh,
school
I
district
understand, because the
website
kids are
without
not
a
in the
need
school.
for it. Yeah.
Right.
But I
I hear you.
appreciate it, thank you.
Right. Next slide, please. Oh, no, any more questions before I move on? Okay, next slide, please. This is a listing of our community members, and I'd like to, I know we just not supposed to mention names, but Miss Rodriguez, who is a parent, actively involved in this process. In fact, our safety department's gotten a lot of questions, got a lot of responses. So our WPS 60 staff they're really involved. So I want to commend her. She's really made us do our homework. So we thank her for that. And with that, I'm going to yield the floor to Ms. Pope. Ms. Pope?
Next slide, please. Next slide. And so we want to go over some general information that many of you already know, but we want to make sure that we're presenting it to you during the budget presentation. Next slide, please. This slide, Mr. Christensen is out at professional development, so he's unable to be here tonight. But this is preliminary information for you to review at your leisure, and he is going to present it again at the next budget workshop. This is enrollment information.
Our enrollment is really dropping.
Like 1 to 2K.
Mr. Christensen will be able to provide more input at the next budget workshop.
Mr. Vukovic, is this a clarity question, a clarification question?
I guess I can bring it up
When we get to Q&A, thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay. Next slide, please. We could look at over the last few years where we were financially. Way back in 2003, we were on the watch list. And you see we went to early warning, to review, recognition, and we've remained at recognition from 2018 through 21. That's the latest information that was there. And our latest 22, we're recognition as well. So we're looking forward to, at the end of this year, being at the highest level, which is recognition as well. Next slide. Oh, you had a question?
Well, we'll wait till.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. We're constantly watching what the state is doing with evidence-based funding. As I've said, we are tier 1, which means that we're not getting all of the money that we need in order to adequately educate our students. And so the greatest amount of money that we get is from evidence-based funding or state funding, as well as property taxes. So we're highly reliant upon the state, right? And so when we looked at, Ms. Hannah, this goes to your question, what is the state requesting versus what the governor is approving, right? So even when we're going out here and we're developing this budget, we look at what the state is asking for, but oftentimes it's not matched when it's enacted. So we take the very conservative approach, right? Because way back in the day, you recall when they would prorate us down by $9 million, $10 million. And so we're very careful in these early stages of what the state is going to give us for state aid, or evidence-based funding as they call it now. So if we look at the document here that was posted February the 15th, they're saying the state requested a 4.4% increase, and the governor is saying that he's going to allocate 4.4% increase, right? But you'll see on the next slide when we go there that I've kept evidence-based funding level just in case something happens between now and then. And then also, we have to be very careful because we're giving some of our evidence-based funding to Learn Charter School. So it all depends on their enrollment, on how much of our money that they get. And they take that off of the top. If you go to the next slide, I tried to depict that here. You'll see where I've pointed to the bottom number in blue, that error in blue. The 152 244, 676.42. That's what we got in the current school year, and that's what I'm projecting in the budget that is being proposed to you tonight, right? But if we go up the 4.4%, you'll see it'll go up to 158 million, of which I'm reluctant to do that right now because it's too early, right? We just simply
that
don't
with
know.
or without Learn's money?
We got the 152 million with Learn money already being taken out,
Okay.
right? Next slide, please. This is of interest to the board, and this is in response to the board's request to keep the taxes level. So you'll note here to the far left where I have tax year 2022, I pointed with an arrow that we extended 52,798,505, right? And so to the right of, that's what we did in this current tax year, in 22. But if you look to the right, tax year 21, I wanted to show you what we extended. And the total of that minus the bond and interest is 52,798,510. And the reason why it was a little lower in 22 is rounding, right? So we're off like $4 or whatever. We lost that. It's just rounding. So we kept, in essence, what I'm saying to you is that we kept the taxes level. Any questions on this slide?
Capped and uncapped. Could you?
Capped is those things that we, other than bond and interest, other than bond and education fund, special education fund, TART fund, life safety, those things are capped.
Because
But
they're a
then-
set amount, right?
Ma'am?
Because they're a set amount, that's why they're
Yes,
capped.
the percentage. Yeah, the limited rate, we can't go above that. But then when you go, I know Mr. Vukovic knows this very well, and then when you go to bond and interest, we don't really levy for that.
Right.
Because it's the bonds that we have that we have to pay off our debt. And you know that that number went down drastically because it used to be like 7 million, but now we're down to 4 million because we're paying off our debt. And many thanks for that goes to Miss Elizabeth Hennessy and Mr. Kyle Harding, which is our bond attorney, which advises us very well on how to refinance our debt so that we can reduce our liability and our payments. Because if we did not do that, then we would have balloon payments,
Right.
right? Huge payments, because you have to remember, we still have a lot of debt. We still have a lot of debt. Yes, sir.
Just Ms. Polk, how would you answer the public when they say to you, yes, you say you kept your taxes for the schools level, yet my tax bill went up, $1,000 or whatever they're telling me?
Yes.
So how do you explain that?
Yes.
Is it a reassessment? Is it
Yes,
just the fact that
absolutely.
Is it reassessed, the house was reassessed, or just the value of other houses in the neighborhood are going up, so theirs went up as well?
Well, it could be a combination of all of that. It all depends on what they assess your EAV is, what they assess your home to be.
Right.
And so all of that is a factor. And I was speaking with you just as we were coming up, that they're going up on the senior amount and homestead. So that's one of the things that I mentioned to the Board of Ed, that we might want to start levying as high as we can go. I know that's scary, but if we trust the process, we will still keep it level. But what happens, we won't lose our tax base. What we've been doing over the last few years, I'm very sad about it, myself personally, is that we've been giving away 2 million, and I could never tax that. Again, the base is low. But if I were to levy up to the maximum that I can and then abate, I don't lose the tax base. So I'm pleading with the board to consider letting us do that moving forward.
And also, Ms. Polk,
And I do want to, unless it's questions, I'm sorry, but y'all have asked me, there's a point for Q&A, so if we want to write down those questions and comments, because we already interrupted a few times for clarifying questions.
Apologies, Board President.
Going to Mr. Riddle's question, there are other taxing bodies that that are that are included in a tax bill.
Yes.
And so while we are staying level, those other taxing bodies, they may increase by 4 cent or 25 cent. And so that makes the tax bill a little higher too. It's not just the school district.
Yes, that's a factor.
And
but-
people
yeah.
people sometimes forget that.
Yeah, that's a factor, but we're the highest.
The biggest chunk of
Absolutely.
For the
the
biggest
dollar.
chunk, and that people can see on their tax bill what it was for the school last year and then what the increase was this year. Likewise, they can see all the others too.
Yeah.
But that's
yeah.
the biggest chunk.
Yes. Typically, when I calculate what the impact would be on homeowners, it's the value of the home that's causing much of the increase in individual tax bills.
Thank you, Ms. Polk.
You wanted to add something? I know that you're, okay. Next slide, please. So on this slide, we included our fund balance projections. If you would hit the hyperlink here, just so that we can show the Board of Education as well as everyone what we're projecting here. I'll have to turn my back because I don't have these numbers. But if you look across here, across the top, you'll see what we're projecting the beginning balances to be as of the end of 22, June 30th of 22. And then if you go down, you'll see the projected revenue that we're projecting, the projected expenditures, scroll down. And then the subtotal of the balance, scroll down some more. And then, of course, some transfers, because we cannot spend money that we do not have. And then also there's some resolutions that the board, they've approved for us, like moving money from the education fund to operations and maintenance to capital projects. So those things are reflected here as well to give us what we believe our projected fund balance is going to be at the end of this fiscal year. Any questions there?
Now, Ms. Polk, you keep asking for questions. Will you
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I'm gonna keep going here. Next slide, please.
Question.
Next slide, I'm sorry. Okay, so this slide has a hyperlink, which is going to take us to every single budget request that our office received. So that you can, if you would hit that for me, please. Okay, so you'll see some tabs, worksheets at the bottom, and they're labeled. Those that are ASAPs, general operating, ASAPs contracts, and ASAP's goals, right? And action steps. And so in the first column, it'll be the school and department, then the goal, the action step, then the resource. I'm trying to remember if you stroll over to my right.
The resource and the amount.
And then if there's FTE associated with that goal, you'll see it there. And then the projected amount that they're requesting for those particular requests. And you'll see that's applicable in each of the worksheets that are there. That's the goals and action steps. If you click on the next worksheet, you'll see the operating expenses, right? It's listed, the school and department, what it is, and the total that's requested, and then the contracts for ASAP. Same thing. And so the same practice applies to operations. And we also provided to you Fund 20, Fund 30, Fund 40, and that sort of thing all the way down. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to go quickly through these at the end of the presentation. If there's any questions for the divisions, Mr. Moulton is here as well as Dr. Cesario. But for the goals and action steps on the detailed sheets that we provided to you, the Deputy of Operational Supports and Programs requested $125,000. Crisis and Safety, they requested 1.9, almost $2 million. They have a request for 21 positions. And the value of those positions, the estimated value of those positions is $1.2 million, I'm rounding, for a total of $3.1 million. Human Resources, excluding benefits and those type things that are routine, requested $114.5 thousand. Transportation, outside of Fund 40, which is our contracts for that, and food service is $125,000. New positions, I think they had one for $35,000, so a total of 160. My office, including contingency, has a budget of 1.2 requested. One position requested 90,000. Total request 1.3. Operations, that's in Fund 20, so we didn't include it here. So you'll see at the bottom, the total non-personnel is 3.5 million. The personnel is 1.3, and that excludes the $156,000 that's for benefits. Next slide. Operations, operating expenses. Again, you see the deputy, 16.6 thousand. Crisis, 465 for general operating expenses. Human Resources, 123.8. Transportation, general operating of 330. And then my office, general operating of 153.5. So for a total of 1,089,000. Next slide. This is where most of our contracts are. You'll see Crisis and Safety has contracts that currently exist and or to be bidded for $262,000. Human Resources, and you'll see that I have a note here, it excludes health, life, dental, and workers' compensation expenses, so they have contracts valuing that $64,000. And then, of course, Transportation and Food Service. This is our, I think, food service budget here of 8.9, and then my office has contracts of 460,000.
So where are the exclusions?
We include those in the overall budget. When we're presenting here, workers' comp, traditional, tort fund, right? Mm-hmm. The benefits, traditional. So we don't include like those things that are absolute. We have them routine, annually, but these are new starts or things that we want the board to consider, because I don't think we're going to change health benefits. You know, we're not going to change that. So I tried to, for the sake of time, in presenting the details, present the detail lines for things like that. But when I'm presenting the budget itself, you will see the benefits. You will see that number there. The existing positions, the cost of existing positions, you will see that number there. I have to include it in salary and benefits.
Thank you, Ms. Polk.
Okay, next slide. So that's $9.7 million on this slide. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yes. So you will see here existing, non-existing personnel, right? Excluding the existing salary and benefits. Operations is requesting $77 million. Okay. And the reason why we do contracts, because you probably say, why are you looking at the contracts? Because they're very similar to the salary and benefits, because we want everyone to review contracts to make sure that those contracts are still valid. Okay. Next slide, please. And we wanted to show you where those expenses would hit, whether it's in the education fund, the O&M fund, the debt fund, transportation, capital, right? And that 80 that's labeled debt, that's in error. That should be the TART fund. Sorry about that. And then life safety fund, totaling the 77 million.
So why is life safety at 0?
Because with life safety, it has to qualify with the 10-year life safety inspection. That's the only way that we could use that money. If we want to do something that's that falls in that category, it has to be approved by the regional office and ultimately by the state. So we try to keep, and this goes way back to when Mr. Godin was here. He harped and harped and put it etched it in our mind that we want to maintain at least $2 million in life safety in case there's an emergency, right? And so we don't try to maintain a huge fund balance in life safety or capital projects because, and I know I'm going here, but I have to explain that, because if we move the money there, we cannot move it out, right? So we're very careful about not moving money there until we have to.
But we have life safety issues.
Right. But if they have not been approved on the 10-year life safety, or if those requests have not gone forth to get approved from the regional office or the state, and we use the money, we cannot then levy above the value of what has been on that, what's on that list.
I understand, but we
Yeah.
had over $100 million in life safety issues.
Yeah. And those were A, B, and C projects.
Absolutely.
Right? And we could only levy for A projects. B projects are those that are coming up, probably would be life safety. C are likewise. I don't know if Mr. Moulton want to speak to that, but those A, they have to be done immediately within 1 year.
I know.
B, 5 years.
I know.
Yeah, so we bumped against this, and that was a hard lesson for me maybe about 10, 11 years ago. I levied our traditional $900,000 in life safety, and I got a call from the county saying to me, Gwen, you can't do that. And I said, what do you mean? You know, it was of it that amount in there. You only have 16,000 left. Right? So we have to make sure that it's on the life safety list of projects, or, you know, we get it approved, the regional, you know, something comes up that it wasn't on the 10-year inspection, and then we have to get it on the list, added to the list.
Well, you know, I am totally confused.
So I think if this may be a takeaway for clarity, I saw your hand, Ms. Lindsay. If you,
Is that okay? So
Yes.
what's the typical timeline operating under this process of having 0 and then getting approval by the regional office and then having it go to the state? Because if it's an emergency, I'm picturing 2, maybe 3 days most. Is that what happens?
What I recall, and I know Mr. Moulton can answer this, what I recall is you could do the repairs and then you send it through if it's a true emergency. But if it's something that, you know, you can wait for, then you submit that paperwork through the regional office and then it goes to the state. And I don't know, it hasn't taken that long to get those approvals.
But I thought, I'm still wondering what happened to those A, B, and C projects, life safety, that that were brought forth and approved by the regional office, okay, and that we had to have completed.
The A projects.
The
yes.
A projects, and we should be starting to work on the B projects, the life safety projects. So that's my confusion here, okay? Because all of those things were already set forth. That maybe not by this board, okay, but it was set forth. And so I'm confused. And maybe Mr. Moulton can unconfuse me, because I'm sure he knows what I'm talking about.
Can I help too, Ms. Hannah? Ms. Hannah is absolutely right. So she's talking about I think we all know she's talking about the life safety list that we were all looking at probably about 6 years ago. And I think, LeBaron, I'll let you address it, but it is a good point of order that we need to present on where we are with our life safety projects, A, B, and C, so
Absolutely.
that the board can be updated. But Ms. Hannah, I do understand what you're
Yeah,
referring to.
absolutely, because we were doing that, and that's why I kind of have some kind of issues with, like, capital projects. We got 35 million, but we still got outstanding life safety. So,
So, good evening, members of the board, superintendent, and staff. So what Ms. Polk said, what you're saying, what the superintendent said is all correct. We did have A, B, C1, and C2 priorities. The A's were within the first year, the B's were within years 2 through 5. C1 and C2 were recommended repairs that were most likely going to be A and B repairs at the next 10-year cycle, which will be around the 2025-2026 school year. When we created our capital improvement plan, we looked at all of those priorities. We addressed the A's, and we will provide an update on that. But some of the A's, addressing the A's required addressing B's and possibly C's. So we did a lot of comprehensive repairs. For example, at Carmen Buckner, we needed to update the plumbing. Plumbing needed to be current. In order to get to all the plumbing, we had to abate the ceilings, and when we abated the ceilings, we replaced the lights, we replaced the strobes and smoke detectors, because we had to do an abatement. So some of those items were B priorities and even C priorities, but we did it as an inclusive package. So we can certainly update you there, where we are in that process, and then we rolled some of the B's and C's in the 10-year capital improvement plan to ensure that we can address them in a timely manner there as well.
it would
So
be
we'll-
really nice to have a presentation, okay? And I'm sorry, board members, if you don't know what I'm talking about, but the administration does. And so I am very interested in where we are with completing those mandated things that we had to do for our district.
We will get you a presentation, Ms. Hannah, so we can give you an update on those.
Thank you.
Were you able to answer the timeline that Ms. Polk kind of threw your way?
Could you
Sure.
repeat? Sorry.
So the current policy right now is to get approval by the Regional Office of Education. Once that's approved, then we go to the state to get their approval. General timing expectations if we have to go that route, just so that I'm aware.
Sure. So for emergencies, true emergencies, it's typically immediate. We might see 3 to 4 weeks. We'll bring the information to the board, say we have an emergency, we will be submitting an amendment so we can, and we will ask the regional office in the state, can we be exempted from bidding requirements to address an emergency? Water main break, school has no water, no electricity, things like that. But there are projects that come up from time to time that get escalated in life safety that is not represented in the same fashion as on the 10-year survey. Brookside fire alarm replacement, when we looked at that about 7 to 8 years ago as part of the 2016 10-year survey, it identified specific locations to be addressed, not the full system, but fast forward that we now need a system replacement. So that was not an emergency because the system is working, but it needs to be improved. That took about 3 months, if I recall. I can verify that, where we submitted the amendment, we brought the information to the Capital Improvement Committee, and then we waited for that amendment, since it was a non-emergency, to go through the approval process. And once we got approval, we brought the project to the Board of Education.
Thank you.
And that's just, I guess, with this point for a little bit of clarity, and it's good to get the update, is we did a comprehensive plan, right? And to their point is we looked at the life safety, plus we looked at other things that were good to do, nice to do, which included parking lots, bathrooms, etc. And we put them on a timeline to to maybe, I guess, Ms. Hannah, what you're saying is they haven't explicitly pulled them out. So each year, even with the 10 million, the 30 million that we set aside over 3 years that this board approved, there was a lot of items that were addressed in that process.
And that's, you're
And
right.
so the presentation coming back is great to get all of the board members on the same page as to where we are currently to date. So I did want to say is that they have, it may not have looked as these are separate. It's because to Mr. Moulton's point, you know, it's been all encompassing with some of the projects. And addressing what maintenance said is we're putting band-aids on things, and if we're going in there to do one thing, it makes sense to just knock them all out. So it'll be forthcoming. Thank you for the questions, and thank you, Deputy Moulton, Ms. Pope.
Next slide, please. So we're going to go through ASAP summary. Next slide, please. Next slide. You'll see here the goals and action steps for ASAP, Career to College, 641, Assessment and Data, 77.5, Academic Support Programs, which is the Welcome Center, 43,000, Career to Education, the 1.2. And so I had a question about that, and that's a good question. Why it's labeled like this? Is it the same thing? And it really isn't. One is for Ms. Evander Fulton, and the other is for Tech Campus, I think it is. Or Dr. Nolt?
Yeah. Hello, yeah, good evening. Ms. Polk is correct. So wherever you see Career to College, that's Ms. Ivana Fulton's department. And then where you see Career to Education, that's our CTE coordinator, Mr. Cicerelli. And the bulk of his expenses do come from the Tech Campus enrollment tuition, so.
Dr. Noel, how much are we paying the Tech Campus in 2023?
I'll have to get back to you on the number. There's a per student cost that we pay, depending on how many students enroll. I don't know the exact figure. I think it's roughly around $700,000 to $800,000 a year on average is what we've been paying.
Okay, yeah, I would say maybe around $1 million now, because it was around that much.
I'll have to double check the numbers for you, Ms.
Yeah,
Hannah.
I'd appreciate that.
They send us bills incrementally, so we just pay them as we get them. It's not like a lump sum payment that we make, so it's hard,
Right.
unless I look at them all in total.
Right,
Thank you, Dr. Nolt.
thank you.
Then equity and accountability. Yes. The 1.7, bilingual, the 2.3, curriculum writing, 780, and middle school redesign, 20,000, equity inclusion, which is FACE, the 1.1 million.
All those new positions.
Those are going to be further screened by the superintendent, but the initial request, this is what it is at present, but those are going to be further screened.
Thank you, Ms. Pope.
All right, next slide. Teaching and learning, you'll see new positions of 958, goals and action steps 13.7 for a total of 14.7 million. IT 6.5, diverse learners, 6 new positions at 924, which is an estimate. Total request 1.8. The area superintendent's 430,000. Outreach has one new position they're requesting for 135. Again, let's remember that the superintendent still has to screen these. She has begun that process, and you'll see in a later slide that we've made adjustments. The numbers have not been adjusted, but we're going to show you that it was adjusted for the positions. Junior ROTC is requesting one position, approximately 40,000, with a request of goals and action steps of 300,000, so that's 340. And then all the way down, you'll see post-secondary, K through 12 athletics, driver's ed, PE, and health, as well as the deputy of ASAPs, their budgets to the far right.
Go ahead, Mr. Vukovic.
Clarification of diverse learners,
Mm-hmm.
6 positions, $924,000, over $150,000 per position. Is that accurate?
I have to go back in there and see, okay, go ahead.
I can speak to what they are. Five of those 6 positions are contract positions, so outside agencies that we have to contract with to fill vacancies that we have. I don't know the specific breakdown of what those 5 are, but it is 5 contract positions for SEL support, and an inclusion specialist is the 6th position.
That's a lot of money.
Can that be a takeaway to provide us the breakdown then?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
It's in the presentation.
Ooh,
and
I
the
love
details.
it.
Yeah. If you go to that one slide, it has
Gotcha.
all of the details there,
I'll
new
pull it up.
positions, everything.
And sometimes, Ms. Lizzing, it's weird. You have to actually highlight the hyperlink and paste it into
Yes.
the search bar. Don't ask me why, but it works if you do it that way. So,
I might talk to Dr. Cuevas and figure that out.
Right.
oh yeah, you just click it. But sometimes when you do it, it doesn't go. But if you copy it and paste it in, so like if you might have, they are hyperlinked, but if you like clicked it, it might not have opened. So, but
All right,
all
cool.
of those detailed requests are in the fine print. So this is the high level. And then if we take kind of the next couple weeks to a month, go through them. If you got questions, concerns, send them to Ms. Pope, superintendent, CC me so I'm in the loop. But yeah, it does list all of the requests.
Perfect. Dr. Nault, that will be my takeaway.
Next
All right,
slide,
go ahead,
please.
Ms. Pope.
Next slide, please, yes. The operating expenses are listed here. Equity and inclusion, accountability, career to college, assessment data, bilingual and multicultural education, IT, diverse learners, the area superintendent's outreach, the deputy of ASAP, as well as the Welcome Center, which totals the $1.2 million in operating expenses. Next slide, please. And the contract values for the different departments in ASAP are denoted here. It totals the $21.3 million, with the highest being in diverse learners. Next slide, please. Site-based budgeting. Next slide. This is where you're going to see adjustments. The superintendent reviewed the position requests that were from the schools, and you'll see that we've highlighted Clark, Cook, Clearview, Lightfoot, AOEC, and Washington High School. In the case of Brookside High School, you'll see that they originally requested 8 positions, but it was reduced to 1. So the value went from the $215,000 to $47,000 as an
Wow.
estimate for the position there.
Yeah, that.
The other schools that had the request, such as Carmen Buckner, requested 7, it remained the same. That estimated value is $240. And so originally there were 29 positions that were requested in the schools. On this particular sheet, we have another one, which was $1,061,000. So now it's 15 positions with an estimated value of $522,000.
Okay, I guess this is a superintendent question. Why were the Brookside High School as
So,
critical as things are over there? Why did we reduce the number of positions that are being requested?
we're not okay, so Yes, number of positions. So Amanda, I want to make sure that I'm speaking to the right things. Were these the security positions that we talked about? So these are security positions that we talked about, and I wanted to meet with Darrow, who was at a conference when we went over the SBB budgets and we did not have his input. So since this is the first budget meeting, I wanted to wait to meet with him, and then this may change for the next budget meeting.
Okay.
Next slide, please. Same thing here.
Ms. Polk, can I add to that?
Yes.
Also, Ms. Hannah, I just want to make it clear, this is what the principal put in, and I wanted to ensure that the director of safety had input also.
Okay.
Same principle was applied for Area 2. Those that are highlighted are those that changes were made. For instance, at Smith, they originally requested, I believe, 1, and so now there's 4. And so it originally was 60,000, now it's at 240,000. The 2 positions that were requested for Hyde Park, they were removed. So there was a total of 7 positions originally on this sheet. It's down to 5, so it goes from 425,000 to 300,000. Next slide, please. So I wanted to show what the changes were. It was originally 1.4 for 36 positions. Now it's down to 20 positions to 822,000. There's a reduction potentially because there's other budget workshops, and as the superintendent said, she's going to review this further. So for those reasons, that's why we said that's going to move into contingency until we know for sure. And the numbers that we're presenting tonight still reflects that $664,000.
And again, just for clarity, the positions would be, depending on what they are, right? The salaries are just projections. So kind of the average. So those numbers go up or down based on experience. And, yep. So,
Pay people right.
yep. All right, go ahead,
Yes.
Ms. Polk.
Yes. Amanda, you wanted to come present your 2 slides.
Good evening, Board President, Superintendent, members of the board, colleagues, community. This provides additional detail in terms of the breakdown of some of the position requests that were presented on the slides prior by Ms. Polk. We aligned our position request through the site-based budgeting process to different areas. So you can see that this initial first slide does have breakdown in terms of positions that would work directly with students. So you can see that Carmen Buckner, the 7 that were on the initial slide, the breakdown of those are listed here. So 3 paraprofessionals to work with some small group instructional support. And then we are building out and including 2 full-day pre-K classrooms at Carmen Buckner, and that would include a para and a teacher for each of those 2 full-day pre-K classrooms. And so you can see the details here. So as you look back at the prior slides by Ms. Polk, you can see the breakdown in terms of what were those positions, what do those numbers actually mean, what kinds of positions are we talking about. The next 2 or 3 slides go over those requests for your detail. Mr. Riddle?
Yeah, so I just see you're actually going to do full-day pre-K then at Carmen? Will that be the only school that has full-day?
We're looking at starting with Carmen as our first go-around with full-day pre-K. We want to make sure we get it right and that we have all the opportunity to see what works, how are we helping make sure that the instructional program is scheduled, that we have the facilities for it, that we are collaborating with community teachers, union, facilities, all those different pieces. And then once we can utilize Carmen as our first go-around, we would definitely like to expand that opportunity.
Great. Glad
Can
to
I-
see we're finally starting that.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up on that then? So how are students going to be selected for that since it's one site and we have a large community that needs full day?
Absolutely.
I personally, as a parent, I have
Love
a
it,
kid
right?
at Epic, and
Yeah.
I'm upset that it's not full day
Yeah,
pre-K.
for sure. I know that when I was when I had a little girl, having the full day pre-K was something I needed, right? And so we are going to be presenting at a subsequent meeting for the board and the community on the full day pre-K program details, and so that will be something forthcoming.
Thank you.
No problem. Next slide, please, Lee. Again, this is just additional details related to the subsequent slides that Ms. Polk already covered. Next slide, please. And again, just another breakdown of that chart from prior. So if you'd like to have additional details, they're there for you. Next slide. Ms. Polk? All right, thank you.
I had wanted to,
Ma'am?
yeah, Amanda. Could you go back to that previous slide? Okay, you talked about JRTC. Okay, and I'm just wondering if in the budget request,
Yes.
whatever, okay, are you including those activities such as they usually go to California and to Florida, the drill team and all of that? Are you including monies in there in JRTC for that?
In the budget detail for each department, you'll be able to see how that is broken down.
Did you include it?
Yes, it's included. I'm sorry.
thank
Yeah,
you.
no problem. Just wanted to make sure you knew where it was in case you needed to refer to it. Thank you.
So on this particular slide, it mimics what we did for the Lincoln Center. It has the schools listed to the left, the value of the request, how many positions, and of course, those numbers are going to adjust, right? Because we didn't have an opportunity to change, because everything has to balance and link together. So we showed you on that other slide what changes are required, right? And then the value of those positions. And then if they had any capital request, and you'll note that AOEC did have a capital request of $2 million. That too has to be vetted by operations and the Capital Development Committee. But those are the requests that were submitted and are included in this presentation for tonight. And the total requests for those particular schools are to the far right.
Why are the middle school superintendent always low in their request?
I'm sorry. Say that one more time, Ms. Hannah.
Why are the middle schools always low in their request?
So Mr. Berry could speak to that more. They go through the SBB process, and so what they request per their SBB. So I do know that Juarez had requested extra instructional coach. I believe he requested 2 APs. I know he changed his budget. So Mr. Berry, can you speak to that?
I know, that's the question, because I'm just wondering.
Yes, each of the middle school teams, like all the other schools, they meet with their ILT and then they come up with their own budget request. This is the site-based budget request, and so they're looking at their own programs and what they're trying to implement. So it is based on that school as far as their requests. We don't restrict those requests. We look at them, we talk about them, we discuss some things, and then we just go from there. But each school does their own individual requests.
Can you clarify on the discussions that you're having with the schools? Are you pointing out maybe things that they're not seeing? Because middle school is a tough age, right? That's a
Yes.
transitional period. That's where we see a lot of behavioral problems. That's where they need a lot of social emotional supports, a lot of social workers, and these budgets don't reflect that they're going to get the students what they need, from my personal perspective.
Yeah, because they're low.
Go ahead, because I want to, go ahead. Mr.
Okay.
Berry.
Yes, I do sit with the school and the principals and work through these budget. But this is the needs that they're seeing as with their team, and so we try to support their requests. Yes, we are looking for some SEL supports and things to that nature, but most of those are done through, we have some outside services. We've had AHS, we have the Jocelyn Center, and so some of those services are contracted out, and so they're not a full-time position with the school.
I'm just thinking safety first, that maybe we should rethink that model, but that can be a takeaway for a later time.
Okay. President Union, you had a question?
No, mine wasn't a question. I think Superintendent, you go ahead.
Yeah, I was also going to state at the next student achievement meeting, the board will be able to view the student improvement plans for each school, and you'll be able to get an insight to the thinking and the strategy of each of the middle schools. And so these budgets tend to align with their SIPs. And so I think that will give you more insight next Tuesday.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
Next slide, please. This is the same. It's additional schools. And then at the bottom, you will note that the schools have requested in Fund 10 a total of $23.7 or $23.8 million, and then Fund 20, $2 million. That's the AOEC request. Next slide. So ASAP has requested $91 million in goals and action steps, operating expenses, and contracts, excluding existing personnel costs for salary and benefits. Next slide. That's the conclusion of our presentation tonight. Are there any questions?
I'm gonna go with Mr. Vukovic first, if you remember what it is, Mr. B. I appreciate your patience.
Way back, you had a slide up there that showed attendance numbers. What is the current
enrollment.
enrollment that? What is the current enrollment number that you're working on right now?
I look at the evidence-based funding number, and that's enrollment is a huge part of that. So I have to go back to that formula that's on ISB's site, because I look at it from that perspective. And they look at the year prior. They don't look at the current year's enrollment.
Can we
So
look at that slide?
So I'll have to get back
Okay.
to you about that, but the enrollment for the current year is not really going to impact our funding for this year.
But there was the hold harmless because of COVID, where I believe that's now expired,
Yes.
or it's coming off. And when you look at that number, and I did have it here, 14,041, that's 8.4% lower than the 2020 number. So if evidence-based, et cetera, is driven by the student population, you might be seeing some decrease in that number. And then also, you know, the one thing is that there's all these pledges that they want to increase spending for education, but in the last couple of weeks, I was in Springfield last week, and the big buzz there is that they've found a big hole that they have to come up with like $990 million for a healthcare program that has just ballooned in cost. And at some point, you know, unfortunately, they're going to come back and do the clawback on some of that. So don't spend it all.
Yeah, that's why we're extremely conservative. Remember, we said that they're recommending 4.4% increase in evidence-based funding, but we're keeping it level because we never know what is going to happen at the state level. And as I said before, we were getting prorations. And in our office, we monitor that very closely because we knew the impact of that. Because over the years when they were doing it, our district lost $40 million.
And also, I had read an article where we may be in jeopardy of losing a lot of our after-school programs because of what's going on down in Springfield.
So, Board of Education, Deputy Moten, Ms. Polk, do what Brandon likes to do, and that is cry every time I get in front of our legislators. We are headed to a cliff. ESSER funds are drying up, right? And so I think we must continually putting in the mind that education has to be a priority. When the pandemic happened, we were tasked with feeding, clothing, providing social services. The rest of the world was shut down, and rightfully so. To me, we were still told we had to feed our kids, right? And so if the state at large is going to have these expectations that we address mental health, we provide personal products, that we provide healthcare services, which all I think are great things that we should be doing, and they have to fund them, right? And so that's the message that I will continue to be, and I think is one of the things that we can do as board members is to advocate that they don't cut funding. I think Mr. Vukovic brings up, I mean, that's what keeps me up at night, Mr. Vukovic. ESSER funds, the hold harmless, and plus the current economic state, all coming together at once. So that is why Ms. Polk is great. Is right in that we have left money on the table, but I think the board has done that because we understand the impact to homeowners and property owners in Waukegan. I have a few questions, so I want to board Ed. I want to give you guys the first dig at it. So
if I could say this quickly, I want to applaud the Board of Education, the superintendent, and my colleagues for strategic budget planning. Because we are doing that, we're able to manage our budget in periods of crisis. Because if you remember, a couple of years ago, when everybody else was scrambling to say that they were going to have to go out for a loan, the superintendent was interviewing with news agencies, if you recall, because we didn't have to even go out for a loan. So we're monitoring that stuff, and we're constantly keeping it before the board so that, and obviously the superintendent, that's what we're saying to her, we're constantly keeping it before you to know that this is a possibility that we go right back to where we were before we got all of this money. But I would say this, that the district has worked extremely hard to have a healthy fund balance, because if you look at your financials, and I say yours because it's the boards and the superintendents and ours, you'll see that we went, when we look back at 2008, 2000, around that time, the district has a negative $12 million in the education fund and a negative $4 million in transportation fund. We had a negative $4 million in capital projects. We were going out for tax anticipation warrants just to make payroll. That's where this district was. But now you look at our fund balance, and I scream every time Brian and all of them tell me, and Miss Angela Edwards tell me what the fund balance is in the bank. We have in excess of $100 million in the bank. I remember a time where we had, what, 20 million? $20 million in the bank across all funds.
Absolutely.
That's not the case anymore.
Right.
So that goes to the hard work that the Board of Education, the superintendent, and even though it's taxing, even though it's hard, even though you don't want to scrutinize and look through all of that stuff, it's paying off. And that's why when we speak about what we're doing in Waukegan, a lot of the school districts are listening because it works. And they're saying that they don't have the money that we do. Not that we have a lot of money, we don't. But we're spending strategically. And so my hat's off to each of you for the work that you've done surrounding this. I needed to say that.
And I want to say thank you to Ms. Polk for telling Brandon no, because every time I see that fund balance, I get excited with trying to spend it. And I understand, but that's the balance. As I remember joining the board, and Ms. Hannah can speak to it, even better than I would. That was just 6 years ago under Governor Rauner, where the state just owed us money and was not paying. And where we were being told, I think we were interviewed at that time, Ms. Polk say, I got 45 days cash on hand. If y'all don't pay us, we are closing schools in 45 days. So I think, you know, a lot can be said to your office with also growing how we can go for some of those grants. Is because what we do when we see the unfunded items is we don't say, oh, well, we go out and try and figure out ways in order to make it happen. And when you already have those ready to go, right, and why I said with the lobbying aspect, Ms. Polk and Mr. Moulton, as well as others on the team, is I recall Waukegan Public Schools lobbying to make sure that even in capital improvement plans, they typically go to cities, they don't forget about schools. We got old pipes, we got asbestos, we got roads, and so we should be included in those funds and resources too. And when we can point to our 10-year strategic plan for capital improvements, and we can say this is line item 126 where we ran out of money and we still got another 200 items on that list, we could go down and fund them. So I do want to publicly recognize the efforts of all involved, because I do know how hard you guys work. And to the Board of Education, the cash on hand is important. Ms. Polk always reminds me, we can be promised the world. If that money is not in the bank, I can't pay. And so that 90-day pay, those contractors that reach out every once in a while, there's a reason that they're reaching out, is because Ms. Polk is saying, I can't just throw the money out the door until we know that the other money is coming in. So it's not pretty, but it has been efficient in order to make sure that that fund balance is growing. And it's not growing just so we can say we have money in the bank. It's because we know that it's going to rain. And we have to be prepared as a district for when the rain comes.
Absolutely.
So, again, I'm sorry. I want to open up the questions because I got a few, but I want to make sure you guys have an opportunity.
I had a couple.
Go ahead, Ms. Gonzalez.
You know, I appreciate, and sorry if my voice is like cracking because allergies and all that stuff. So my takeaway is also like what has already been said is this strategy to understand maybe the tax levy a little bit better and to go at the max, even though that's kind of shocking for some of us to really hear. You had brought it up several times before, and I guess I didn't really understand it, not being a homeowner yet. But now I feel like I understand it a little bit better, just knowing in the future what's to come and what we're leaving on the table. I do think that if we consider that as a board, though, there has to be intense education so that our community understands why that's our strategy and why we would even consider something like that. Because, you know, I think Mr. Riddles had said it before, we have to have some skin in the game. It takes money to educate our students, and I love the position that we're in, but they need more, either from us, but especially from the state. So I just wanted to put that at the forefront because I am thinking about that, and that is scary. But I also wanted to ask, you know, because President Ewan talked about grants. I'm glad to see that people are, you know, at all of our sites are requesting for more positions. I think that we would absolutely consider that, and I'd love to see the breakdown of it. Other board members had mentioned that before too. But the thing is that I want to know how it's tied to grant opportunities that maybe we're considering or we have had some new information about within the past year. Because, you know, for example, for bilingual services, I love that. You know, we need more teachers that are within that department that could service those families. I know we've missed some of our students that have bilingual needs because we're assessing them late, or there's like a disconnect between what the students need and how the families can advocate for them in the classroom. But out of that, like 5 million requests, how many of those positions are, you know, for the newcomers program? Who will be directly impacting the students in the classroom? Those are the things I want to understand more when I'm seeing the ask. And, you know, I also didn't want to ask too many questions because I know that this is the first time that we're sort of like looking at the budget. But those are top of mind for me, especially given the refugee crisis. Like we're seeing it in the news in Chicago, and some of them are here in Lake County. How are we helping some of those students acclimate to our school system? And also, you know, family engagement, I talked about it at the last board meeting, but we struggle with that. You know, whether it's the Black Family Support Network, whether it's the BPAC, whether it's whatever, I'd like to know from within our site-based budgeting, what resources we're allocating to get PTOs within each school started or stronger. And that may not be an ask that the principals have allocated, but that's where I would like to put more funding too.
Thank you for those takeaways.
I'll send my questions,
Ms.
sorry,
Gonzalez.
because some of them are about the positions and then, yeah.
Understood. Mr.
So
Fabian.
I did open up the spreadsheet and was looking through it as you all were talking. So those positions are detailed out there, and I do see some support for the newcomers and FACE program. I do want to commend those departments that really did put in their SMART goals, so then we know specifically why we're requesting certain positions or certain items. But I'm looking at not all departments did that. And so I guess to Adriana's point is, how do those positions really align with what exactly are you trying to do? Because if you give me a umbrella statement, it doesn't really tell me what is the true outcome, because I can say student achievement for all of it, right? My FACE goal, student achievement, my equity goal, student achievement, I can put that for all of it. But there are some departments that took the time to really spell it out, and I appreciate that. So if we can go back in and kind of tease it out a little bit more, just so that we feel more comfortable as to, okay, yeah, that was well thought out. That's why they're actually requesting that, and that's the outcome that we can expect.
So go ahead, Mr. Are you Ms. Lindsay? Mr.
I was
Riddle?
trying to hold mine, but if other people, I can go after.
Mr. Riddle, you got a couple questions?
I'm going to leave it all right now.
You said no.
I think most of my questions have been answered here.
Okay, Ms. Lindsay, and then I'll go.
Okay. Can we go back to the slide where you were talking about that, I believe it was the 154 figure of after the LEARN schools, just for the community?
The evidence-based funding.
Yes. Can you just specifically say for the community how much is going to LEARN?
I didn't put it on this slide,
Right.
but I believe that we're giving them about $5 million.
Ooh, and it has increased.
So that's a big concern, right? Because that signifies to me that our community is not trusting our schools, and they're pulling their children out and sending them to the charter instead of our public schools. And there's so many advantages to being in the public school system. So I think that's going to be a takeaway for us as a board, if that number's increasing, to analyze what we need to be doing better, and maybe it's just communicating more clearly with the community, trying to engage them more, right? But that was a concern, so thank you for giving me that quick number. I do have a couple of other questions. So as far as the ASAP funding, where would dual enrollment fit into that budgeting?
I don't see Dr. Norton back, but dual enrollment.
He's up front.
Oh, that's why.
He's like, I'm going to be answering questions.
I
I'll just
figured
sit.
I'd just stay close, yeah.
Yeah.
I know Ms. Fulton has budgeted a lot for our dual enrollment expansion initiative. So part of in her budget request, you'll see expansion of our dual enrollment courses, AP courses, our CTE pathways, but that's more in Mr. Cicerelli's budget. So you'll see the inclusion of expansion of dual credit reflected in her budget.
Okay, so with that expansion off the top of your head, and if not, I can take it as a question to punt to Ms. Fulton, but are we expanding the number of students that are able to engage in that program? And are we communicating to the community the benefits of dual enrollment so that our students can get that associate degree in a variety of areas while they're in high school, covered by the district?
Yes. So ironically, we met with CLC today. We have a monthly dual credit committee meeting, and we meet with Jesus Ruiz at CLC every month. And all the things that you're mentioning, Ms. Lensing, were actually the topics of our conversation about the fact that we are expanding dual credit, but there's still a wide range of our stakeholders that aren't familiar with it, how it works, what paths it can lead them to, et cetera. So establishing a communication plan for our parents and stakeholders was one of the things we discussed. But the second thing was, most of our counselors, they're very good at counseling students academically, but dual credit is very complicated, and you have to understand kind of the different nuances of dual credit. And we spoke about educating our counselors and making sure they were speaking the same language across the board, because what we're finding is if a student speaks to Ms. Fulton, they're getting one response. If a student speaks to their counselor, they may get a separate response. And then some of our partners as well are muddying the water a little bit too. So
Unified message is key.
correct. So we're trying to, part of our conversation today was coming up with a clear communication strategy about dual enrollment and the benefits of it, of course. And then to answer your next question about that associate's degree, that's part of our new CTE pathway expansions to have an associate's pathway, so that when students enroll as freshmen, they can start taking dual credit classes and graduate with a diploma and an associate's degree. I think we had one student that
Yeah,
did
a couple
here
years ago.
previously, a couple years ago.
One student.
North Chicago, I believe, had 9 in the last couple of years that have done it. So when we heard that number, we thought, we want to be able to match that, if not exceed that number, in Waukegan. So we have the courses that are required. It's just a matter of us mapping that out so that students understand if they want to go that route. Here's what I have to take as a freshman. Here's what I have to take as a sophomore, and so on down the road. So.
And just to be clear, when you say you're educating the counselors on the messaging, we're including the middle school counselors in that as well, right? Because we got to plant those seeds.
Yes.
At all
A huge strategy of ours is that 6 through 12 matriculation between the counselors across the board. Okay. So having a counseling collaborative is another thing that we've just, not today, but we discussed previously, to making sure that 6 through 12 counseling, message is also the same across the board for all of our counselors too. So.
Okay, I have one more question, but I believe Ms. Fabian wanted to go in.
Just to touch back on that, I do want to say thank you because I don't think you guys hear that enough. I did, as a parent, receive an informational letter about dual enrollment, and it looked like you expanded more options.
Yes.
Like there's more courses available, but it was in parent ease and very friendly. It wasn't overwhelming, so I could actually look at it and not sigh and read it and understand what it is. So I want to say thank you to whoever put that together and sent it out, because I feel like that's one step. That, I'm sure you have more communication coming out around it, but that's one good step, and it was very parent friendly, and I like that I saw more classes being offered. So thank you.
Yeah, and Jen's team has been instrumental in this process too, pushing her coordinators on identifying dual credit options as opposed to traditional coursework, et cetera. And I will say the number of students that we have that have already selected dual credit classes for next fall has increased by over 400% from this current year. Yeah. So the word's starting to get out. Dual credit is starting to become a thing in many districts. It's actually starting to overtake advanced placement courses because students and parents see the long-term benefit of getting workforce readiness opportunities, getting internships, getting other things like that. And we took a tour of the CLC Lakeshore campus today, and the classrooms they have there are amazing for nursing, for HVAC, for early childhood. I mean, they have so many different programs there that. And we've had student tours. I asked Ivana today. I said, students have gone through here, right? So she's organizing tours to go through in small groups so they can see the classrooms and everything else. So yeah.
Awesome. And you said one more question, Ms. Lindsay?
Board President? Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. You can go
Ms.
ahead.
Lindsay had one more question.
Well, it's not tied to this, but if it's tied to that, it makes more sense.
Go ahead.
Okay. And this might be a takeaway, but back in the day, I was in the JROTC program, and we had pretty high numbers. And from my understanding, we don't have as high of enrollment numbers. So this might just be a takeaway, and maybe we can actually get that department to come and have a presentation to give the community an update on it. But if the enrollment is down and their goal is to get more people in, I'm just curious as to what exactly the status is, and it might just be a more involved question for a presentation.
I can answer just real quickly.
Ooh, okay.
I know one of the requests that Colonel Painter made was for that extra instructor that you saw this evening for an FTE request. And the purpose of that person is going to be to help bolster recruitment for the program. So there are certain criteria I know that they have to meet to maintain our status.
Right.
I'm not really familiar with it, but I know there's certain numbers that they have to meet in terms of enrollment to maintain their status.
Yep.
So his ask is that we provide that position to help do that as well.
So has the staffing level been remaining constant and we're adding on to it, or we had a dip in staffing and this would take us to, like, let's say the past 10, 15 years?
We have a dip in our JROTC enrollment. So
staffing went down with it?
staffing has decreased with it, but that's why he's asking for an additional position
Makes sense.
being funded by the district, because it's not being provided by the program itself. So
I could
Sorry.
add a little bit onto that as well, because what happened with our OTC, even after I left, nobody that and I graduated only in 2014, but there was no one that I know from the program now. The turnover was so fast. So I think that that was part of the dip. And when students can't get together and march and do the parades and all that stuff, COVID completely killed those events and some of those leadership building opportunities. So now I think it's, if this is the only request that they have of us, absolutely,
Absolutely, and also, I don't know if it is still the same thing where the district pays a portion
of the salary.
The salary, and then the government pays the other part.
Yeah, I think a comprehensive presentation would be helpful.
Yeah.
Yep. Mr. Riddle?
Yes. My question is on industrial arts. I know that we have Johnson Controls that's helping us fund an HVAC system, but there was also an industrial arts grant in 2019. Department of Defense had funded with a $500,000 grant from a local community member. Is that going to be reflected in here? Are we going to try to get those programs? Are we budgeting for those? I believe some instructor maybe had retired that was doing some of that work on that industrial arts program. I think it was called Ignite.
I can't speak to that particular program. I did get an email about your inquiry from the superintendent, and we did follow up about the donations with the equipment and everything. The majority of the equipment is being utilized still to this day.
Good.
So that's good to hear. And Mr. Cicerelli, the new CTE coordinator, he's still in the process of kind of diagnosing each one of the programs to see what needs they still have, et cetera. So this is something that he's, throughout the short time that he's been in the role, he's establishing relationships with the teachers to find out some of the budgetary requests that they have, and you'll see in his budget requests, I think his budget was 1.2 something, 1.2 million, with a bulk of that going to the tech campus. But he has been very thoughtful with his different teachers about what they need to sustain and maintain their programs, including
because I just think the board has said
program.
too that industrial arts is really important for a lot of our kids.
Absolutely.
It's going to engage them, and yes, we can only send so many out to the tech campus, but if we have the more programs we have here. that our kids can use, and then move over, like you said, to CLC, it gets them engaged and excited. A lot of the kids that are not at this point interested in moving to college, but there's some great programs, and of course industry's being brought back to this country, and so I think there's going to be a lot of those jobs available in the future that our kids can make a decent living on.
We have a 400 person employer in Waukegan that is starting with a factory that's going to be majority fully automated, and so the types of skills that are needed is increasing in the workforce. So we have to figure out, me and Ms. Gonzalez had many a discussion on the future of work, and what that looks like and how we prepare our students for it. So thank you for that takeaway. Ms.
Barber. Can I be a liar and ask one more after? Sorry.
I'll say Ms. Barber. He's bringing her the microphone.
Yeah.
I just want to correct one thing, and that is that the junior ROTC staff has not gone down.
Okay.
It's still the same.
Okay.
We have gotten less in reimbursement, I think, for one of the positions. So because of the importance of the program, we've maintained the same personnel, and the district has covered that reduction.
Go ahead, Ms. Barber.
I just wanted to piggyback on the dual enrollment. My daughter is on track to receive her associate's degree next year. However, they did send out a notice, which was wonderful. I just hope that we can continue to send this out, because it is something important, and my only issues have been where my daughter, when we first started signing up, and she met with CLC and got all the information, but when we came to the high school, it was so unorganized, where when we left, she's like, I just want to stay at the school. I don't want to do this. And I said, no, we're going to be patient. We're going to keep following up, and we're going to get this completed. And so even fast forward to this year, or her planning for next school year, it's still disorganized. So we need to really, and even at CLC, I told them as well that we need to work on organizing at the CLC level and also at the high school. And then the issues that we have had with transportation. Right now, I think we have about 6 students, maybe. Most of them are seniors, so they drive, but we have 2 students that ride the bus. Sometimes they're not picked up. I'm not sure fully of the reason, but if we get these numbers up like North Chicago, and even more, if he's saying 400%, we need to have it organized so our students are not stressed out.
And the only point to Miss Barber too is our student that graduated was, when we say dual enrolled, they did a full day at Waukegan public schools, and then at night would go and take classes at CLC. And so the difference in that, yeah, they graduated with a high school diploma and an associate's, but they were kind of unrelated, right? So we want to make sure that they're doing it and it's interwoven into their school day. So 400% growth is amazing. It's a great opportunity. We talk about some of the barriers that exist for minority students, and we know that math placement and reading placement is a barrier. And so for students to be able to receive that credit while still in school saves them money, and they're more likely to graduate with either an associate's or a 4-year degree. So any funding, I think, as we hear, Superintendent, as you guys go through with a fine-tooth comb, there are any ways that we can enhance that, any type of transportation needs that are needed, I think that would be a good place for us to speak to. Now, Mr. Riddle, did you have any other questions? No. Ms. Lindsay said she did have one more.
I was a liar. I apologize. It's
have
more
one.
just a request then. So I understand we're going to get an update on the capital improvements from Mr. Moten's department. I just, in that ask, want to make sure we identify in the ABC structure where some of the community's concerns have been. I know Mr. Sebecki has been very vocal about the locks on doors, which is a huge issue, the windows over at the Washington campus, making sure we're OSHA compliant. So when you give us that presentation, if you can make sure to highlight those points for the community, because they've been very vocal about it. That's it.
Okay, one last thing.
Go ahead, one last thing, Ms. Hannah.
Yeah, I want to say, good job, Ms. Pope. Fine. And your financial department, kudos to all of them and hard work that you all have done. Kudos to all of the principals that worked hard to put their SIP plans together. And what I am really going to be pushing for, Superintendent, is that we are focusing on our elementary reading proficiencies, where our students are reading by the time they get proficiently, by the time they get to 3rd and 4th grade. And if we do that, we will have greater success as the students go up in grade level. And so I'm really going to be pushing for that. I know that, and I don't know where it is now, I know the United Way started the Success by 6 program. It was very successful. They worked with many of our students. But we have to, our priority, I know my priority as a board member, is to make sure that all of our students are proficient in reading. We have to make literacy our priority. And once we get literacy down pat, students will be able to do math, they will be able to do science, social studies, they could master those tests that they are taking. And so I think with all of that money that we got in reserve, okay, you know, within reason, we need to put that money into making sure that our elementary students come out of elementary school proficient in reading before they step into a middle school.
Well, and hopefully that includes giving our middle school students and high school students that lost those opportunities support
Absolutely.
they need, because that's where we're going to see a lot more violence, and they need to be able to get jobs to earn incomes to not create violence.
Absolutely.
So just want to make that quick note.
That's right, and that's absolutely correct. Those that have missed the opportunity to be proficient in reading, we also have to focus and prioritize those students as well. And so I'm really going to be pushing that.
Thank you, Ms. Hannah and Board. So these could be takeaways. I don't want to belabor the point, but crisis and safety taking over $1 million for new positions. Is this based on the completed safety assessment? So Deputy or Director Wilson, that might be a you question. No, I know you were. So Director Wilson, and it could just be brief, and if it's a takeaway, but were the crisis and safety positions that were proposed, was that based on completed safety assessment?
Yes, partially it was.
Okay, $5 million in positions for bilingual based on, is that based on enrollment?
Ms. Ambrosio?
So the total, to Ms. Hannah's point, was 101 new positions. And so is that based on enrollment? I mean, that's a tremendous increase.
Tremendous.
There are a large number of positions in there. 44 of those positions were positions that we added that we're looking to bring in tutors to assist our fourth grade students because of the learning loss that they received. So that was part of the strategy there. We're not sure if we're going to reduce that number because we don't want to encumber all those funds if we can't have all those vacancies out there. So we'd like to bring in as many in-person tutors. Some of the ideas that have been brought up is using retirees so they wouldn't necessarily be FTE. We could use part-time positions as well. And so that's not been confirmed yet. That was something that we would discuss, and something that we discussed during the previous budget workshop. There are 22, I'll let you speak to the other positions, but that's where the 44 there are right now. So we're not going to encumber all of those right now, but we would like to have the opportunity to increase that so that we can really shore up that proficiency gap for those fourth graders, because those students were impacted so adversely during the pandemic.
Well,
and
they're
so
now sixth graders, though.
well, no, they were,
The
these
second
were,
graders
yes.
that we're supposed to get more reading instruction.
Yeah,
for
the,
fourth graders.
the- yeah, the now, yes, that's exactly.
'Cause
So
see, actually, everybody
Yeah.
lost.
they did, but
There are some more.
we're using multiple strategies, not
Yeah.
one. That's another one that we're using. I'm going to let Ms. Ambrosio speak to the other.
Right, and out of your 101 requests, and you said multicultural, could you?
I'm just kidding. We couched them there. They're under ASAP, but Lisa, Dr. Bublitz, Ms. Ambrosio, Dr. Bublitz, Ms. Rice de la Sanchez, they work together
'Cause we need
under
monolingual
ASAP.
teachers too.
No, they're not bilingual teachers. They're
okay.
those 44. Ms. Ambrosio will speak to the other 60 or 56 positions, whatever it might be. But those 44 were just under there as ASAP.
Okay.
Yeah, they were not bilingual or ESL teachers. They would have been tutors.
And we're not replacing certified teachers with tutors, are we?
No, not at all. Not at
Okay.
all. So we would still have the tutoring programs that we have. But in addition to that, we would also bring in folks that could do in person, because that was, we want to be responsive to the feedback that we received from the board and from the community, that we could utilize a variety of tutors that could come in, either retired teachers and or just folks that we could hire to do this in the short term. We would hire them with an end date of the end of the year, just so that they would know that it was a temporary position, but we'd also provide an opportunity to have multiple types of positions also part-time. So this is something that we're trying to do, again, to address the impact that those students had during the pandemic.
Thank you.
Sure. Lisa, do you want to speak to the other positions?
I just wanted to highlight that it's actually our current third and fourth grade. And our current third and fourth grade are more than 50% below reading proficiency right now. They were the ones most hit during COVID. They were our babies coming in kinder and first grade. And so that was and it's not, I wanted to clarify, that's not a bilingual thing. It was teaching and learning, diverse learners and bilingual. So that's what those positions were for. Along with that would come the ongoing professional development that those paraprofessionals would be receiving to support instruction in the classroom alongside the teacher with those reading strategies and math if so needed. As far as the rest of the positions, those are positions that we already have allocated. There are 22 ESL resource teachers, and there are 35 bilingual tutors already. That was just a placeholder to hold on to that money because we have to make sure we hold that money aside, right, to be able to pay their salary. So they're not additional positions, they're positions that already exist. However, I did request, I'm so sorry, one extra family support manager in those 101. One is a family support manager. One is a newcomer psychologist, which is something that I'm still working out with Dr. Bublitz as far as psychology, but we have a lot of trauma that our newcomers are encountering, and so the need I'm hearing from principals, parents, is that we need to address that, and so I'm requesting that newcomer psychologist. And then finally, we are requesting a GLAD trainer, so an in-house person that will provide GLAD training that will significantly save the district hundreds of thousands of dollars over the next 5 years.
Can you elaborate for the community?
Yes, I'm sorry. So GLAD is Guided Language Acquisition Design. It is a professional development that we're providing to all of our teachers pre-K-12 on strategies on how to reach the learner. So this is not just for EL, it is for monolingual, it's for diverse learners, it's for all students, and it's very beneficial to all of our students, and we're already seeing some improvement in the classroom with strategies. Yes.
Can I ask on the structure of that? So is that going to be during, in what format are you going to provide that development for the staff?
So the development started about 3 years ago, and we did it in waves. So each year we contract with GLAD, and we organize it where we have our teachers get a training during Institute Days, and it's a 3-hour training 6 times a year to be able to be GLAD certified. We already finished with pre-K through 8th grade, and next year we're looking to begin in the high school. However, every year we have about between 100 and 150 new teachers. And so we have to pay for those new teachers to get GLAD certified as well. So by having a GLAD trainer already in the district, they can not only provide that professional development at significant cost savings to the district, but then they can also support the principal in the building when they have areas of need that they're seeing strategies that teachers might need more support with, and they can pull that GLAD trainer to model in the classroom and maybe conduct walkthroughs with the principal to be able to identify other areas of need.
Perfect. I do have a couple of follow-up questions, but I'll just reach out to you directly, not to belabor the Thank you.
And I got one more question in terms of literacy, reading, and all that, okay? Something that worked in our district forever were our reading specialists. And we need to look at bringing reading specialists back into our district for our students. We're doing all of this, but then there's always some students that needs that extra. And that's where those reading specialists came in and working with those students. So that's something that I am going to be also advocating for, to bring those reading specialists back into our district.
I have two questions, maybe kind of clarifying Ms. Hannah's point. Will the tutors be in the classroom taking students out, or how would the tutoring be conducted after school?
No, we haven't really baked out the entire
Okay.
plan yet, but the vision is that they would be in the classroom
Got it.
providing support.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Providing
And then
specific targeted support.
Mhm.
Yes.
And
Long
then
as they're as long as they're not being used
To teach core
satisfy,
instruction.
Yeah, like science or.
certified teachers.
Right. So my second question too, and maybe this is a Dr. Cesario. Thank you, Ms. Ambrosio. We had, and I don't know if we've received it kind of automatically or if we had to apply for it, but there was that like $2 million available like as a pipeline for teachers, like Black and Brown teachers who wanted to become.
We did not get that grant.
Okay.
So we were part of we
Like a
signed on
cohort.
with National Lewis, and we did not get that grant.
Okay.
They did reach out to
Why?
me recently.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. We
No,
don't
it's
have
all
any
right.
feedback.
We weren't. We were part of. There was 4 other. North Chicago was in it. There were a few other districts that were a part of it.
Black teachers?
No,
The fund
No,
was
it's
to
to
get
get
more
more.
teachers.
No, I know.
Yeah.
You know what? We were not the. They reached out to us. They wrote the grant. We were just partners on the grant. I presented it maybe 6 or 7 months ago, probably pretty early on in the year.
It was a
And
collaborative grant.
It was a collaborative grant. There were elements that we had to contribute, mostly just data about our district and other pieces, and whether or not we would commit to funding portions of it, and all of you agreed that we would. But ultimately, we did not receive that. They did not receive the grant. Maybe that's a better choice of words to use. We were not the lead on the grant. They were. But they did reach back out to us and let us know that there was one for paras that were interested. And so I did work with Amy Montalbano to see if we could start developing that pipeline for giving our paras an opportunity to earn their Bachelor's of Arts so that they can teach if they want to.
We've had this teacher academy that did that before.
Yes, she mentioned that to me too. This was just another one. I didn't want to say no. They reached out and they said, this is available. So I reached out to Amy Montalbano and we talked together. We created a flyer, held informational meetings, informed some people. So I know there's a few folks that are interested. They had about 4 or 5 slots available for us if we wanted to. And so right now Amy's working with a couple of folks to see if they want to sign on to that.
I just bring it up because it's those kind of key opportunities that unfortunately we didn't get it, but in the future, like let's.
We're always looking out for those opportunities. Yeah. We really are. Not to interrupt you, but we're always looking out for those opportunities. Dr. Nault and I were at a conference last year, and we connected with some folks who had some interesting programs, and so we've been in contact with them. We're always looking to see what we can do to expand.
Increase.
Yeah, and increase the number of folks that we have here.
Okay.
Always.
Thank you.
We're looking for those opportunities.
So,
thanks.
I guess I'll go ahead, Ms. Ambrosia.
Sorry, we did qualify for the Elevating Educators Grant. So we received $350,000 from the state in order to provide tuition payments, et cetera, for teachers and other folks that are working towards their Pell to work in bilingual education and ESL endorsements.
Okay,
so we did get that, so it was wonderful.
Awesome. So, and I got 3 more points, and then unless it sparks any other conversation, board, we can go home. Budgets don't matter if we can't fill the roles. Christine's point on middle school positions, I believe, Christine, is that, or Ms. Lindsay, I'm sorry, is that a lot of positions are not filled. And I think that if positions were filled in the district, you probably wouldn't, need additional. You need, and there needs to be a concentration in on us filling our positions. And so out of the increase and the request for increase and the rationale for them, which are great, it doesn't matter how many positions I add if I can't adequately staff. And so we have to be super aggressive in filling our open vacancies in the paras, teachers, any open admin positions is because I can, to Ms. Polk, or not, I'm not gonna make that point for her, but some of the fund balance is due to the fact that we haven't been fully staffed, right? And so by not expending that money, by setting it to the side and not having those people in the classroom, it puts a burden on the other staff members. It puts a burden on, it reduces the amount of services that students have access to. It makes issues of staffing and the vacancies that we have when people do inevitably get sick or have life situations much more difficult to deal with. And so I do know, and when I scanned it, I did not see, and we can talk about that language, and I probably should make this an email, but I'm going to state it because it came up from a community member, and I believe in it, is how are we going to more aggressively recruit individuals to Waukegan, and how are we going to do that in a way that also gets them to make Waukegan home? And so I would like to see, again, no residency requirements, but for those staff members that are choosing to make Waukegan home, again, if we got 108 or whatever it is, but as of last time it was 108 vacancies, if I filled 100 of those, right, I think that you would see a significant reduction in some of the pressures and stresses that we have. So I did not see that money added to the budget. I think if we as a board decide to fund it, set a dollar amount for it, figure out and work with the union in order to bring it to fruition. And then, Ms. Polk, I'm not thinking about a lot. I'm saying 100,000. We see how far that gets us.
There's also the
we see how far that gets us.
There are teaching colleges all over the United States, and we should be working with those teaching colleges that that are having the students that we need, okay? And because I'm just gonna say it, right? I don't believe in having to go out of the country to bring those teachers here because we can't find teachers. And I'm talking bilingual teachers, I'm talking monolingual teachers. We have a whole big United States, and if we make it attractive, we could get those people here.
Sorry, just to clarify, Mr.
Yes.
Ewing, because I think with those vacancies, right, we're not attractive enough for individuals to come to Waukegan, and one of the possible solutions you're thinking is the some sort of incentive or reimbursement for living here in Waukegan. But are we able then to use site-based budgeting to add to their salary, not just for being here in Waukegan, or that's going to be simply through the union contract? And if it's just simply through the union contracts, would it be pulling from these same fundings that we're talking about here this evening?
It's all the same pot, so theoretically, right? It would. You address one concern dealing with retention and attractiveness of salary through the contract.
Right.
Then there's to me a step above, right, is we're a little bit lower, but most teachers, right, 45, 55,000, 65,000, depending on location where you are. What's going to get individuals to move to Waukegan? So to Ms. Hannah's point, if I'm going and I'm recruiting at a teaching college, and the only thing I'm presented with is a bunch of different schools that are all paying the same amount, what's going to make Waukegan a more attractive option? And my personal opinion is cash in hand is an attractive option, right? Is I almost, except for the fact that I was too skinny, I'll tell you that story at another time, became a military service member. I actually have a selective service number because they had a $20,000 sign-on bonus. Now, I don't want money to be the only driver, right? But if they're in education, they care about kids. And now if we're saying, are you willing to come to Waukegan, stay for a certain amount of time, and if you sign either a lease or purchase a home, that there would be, in Waukegan boundaries, that there would be some type of incentive. So
Yeah.
I believe
And we need to work
Can-
on that.
Sorry, so if it's one pot, then
Mhm.
then as we're going through the contract negotiations, I think we need to start maybe shifting those funds into that so that it is the cash in hand that they're needing. And listening to teachers across the nation, many are leaving the profession to become bakers or fill in the blank,
Yeah.
executive assistants, because it is more cash in their pocket.
so salary has to be part of the overall retention and recruitment strategy. So to me it's not an either or.
Perfect.
It's a both and what I
Love
want to
it.
do is test it. Is because if we limit the amount of pot and we say when it runs out, it runs out. But I hope, right, is my teachers, my parents, my everybody else understands that the goal is not it's to relieve the pressure. It's because when those classes are empty, you're subbing. When those classes are empty and we can't find a sub, there are 32 kids in the classroom, right? And then how are kids learning how to read? And so we can add all the positions in the world.
Right.
If we can't fill them, it does no one any good. And so I think we have to be, as aggressive as we can be as it relates to recruitment strategy. So that is mine. Is I like this budget. I think it's a great start. You all did a lot of time, put in a lot of effort, put a lot of thought into it, as you always do. But that's what we have to actually do is go out and fill those positions if approved.
I'm fine with
Can-
that perspective shift if we're shifting funds to make it appeasing to candidates.
Yeah.
So can I just add to that?
Yeah,
That
of course.
we could either create a committee or have some kind of roundtable discussion to come up with more creative solutions like that.
Right.
Another solution that I was thinking of is more of a, instead of recruiting outsiders, I shouldn't say instead of, in addition to, because it needs to be all inclusive, recruiting from within the community by using our staff members. I personally, when I was working in the district, have recruited several people to come and work in our district, right? Because we had parent volunteers that were always there. And it's like, hey, well, you're here. Why don't you get paid to be here, right? And so if we could find some sort of stipend where we could give our current staff some sort of incentive to recruit their fellow, their friends, their families that are here already in the community to come in and work for us. And I think that's a twofold thing. One, our current staff gets some extra money, but it also incentivizes them to talk about all the positive things that are happening in Waukegan Public Schools, because it's also a branding issue, a perspective issue, right? And if we're constantly talking about, I love working here and I love this place, you should come with me, more people are going to be attracted to that message and come as well. So if we could kind of figure out a time, because I know that's not a discussion for here and now, but to kind of look at what
I
are
see
some
you,
different
Ray.
ways.
So I'm at so I get
Work
it.
on
We have to work on the culture and the climate.
Right. I'd add that Rockford, I went to, when we attended Triple I conference last year, Rockford did a presentation on this. I may have been the only board member that was there from Waukegan, but they have worked on this for 10 years and they have quite a retention strategy. But it includes some of what you're talking about, but a lot of other things as well. Assigning master teachers to each new recruit. They tell all these recruits ahead of time what they're going to get if they come to Rockford. And it includes a lot of what you're saying, plus a lot of other stuff. And they had to work with the union for a long time to get more things approved. But the union saw the benefit of that.
I'm sure ours will too. It's because again, the people being stressed and it's not benefit to anybody. So, Ms. Vukovic, you had a point, comment, question.
Do you want to keep teachers? Do you want to get new teachers in here? Treat them like you treat your administrators. Last month, the old Board of Education took the superintendent's recommendation, and you're now paying for the TRS contribution for those people and health insurance. Treat classroom teachers the same way you do administrators, and you will have more benefits. You'll have those people come here, you'll have those people stay here. That was the rationale used last month, why you wanted to vote for that, because you needed to get qualified people here. You have qualified people in this district, treat them like the professionals that they are.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Vukovic. Mr. Sabeki.
I agree with Ms. Hanson too. If we don't change the climate and culture of our schools, no one's going to be attracted here. If teachers, students that do not feel safe
you're not going to retain or bring teachers from outside within. They can go somewhere else, like you said, $10,000 to $12,000 more, a couple miles away, that get those supports there, and they're just going to bypass Waukegan. You know, we get how many new teachers, and the turnover rate of teachers hired just this year alone that have left this district after a couple months. And we see that every day on board docs, when we're under personnel, how many leave? Do we do exit interviews? Because every time it's listed on there is no reason given, no reason given, no reason given, no reason given, no reason given. We can't fight and decide these and figure out these problems because we don't know what the problems are or why people are leaving. So yeah, there was there's an email that comes and they can speak to that. To Mr. Vukovic's point, is part of it is how you get that to people that are leaving. We even see that as come up with our retirees. It's once you leave the district, if you only have a district email on file, right? If you only have a phone number, that's a home number. So that goes back to making sure that we're continually updating information so that we have valid information. Mr. Figueroa provides an annual report on the ones that he does receive, and so that'll be forthcoming as part of the end of year recap. So I do want to say is that I agree that the culture and climate needs to be improved. I also go back to my point is if you have a ton of vacancies in your building, you are stressed. And so it's a both and. I got to change the culture and climate. I got to also get bodies in there in order to stabilize. It's because a lot of the burnout is because I'm doing more than I am should be, right? Not even capable or able, because most of our teachers are going in and giving 120%. You can't give 120% for 30 years. I mean, it's hard. So I want to acknowledge, and I understand exactly where you're coming from, Mr. Sabecki, and I also want to say we got to do it is because we're not going to change the culture and climate just by focusing on what's here internally. It's because if I'm not replacing those teachers that are leaving, if I'm not talking and coaching through whatever the reasons are, if we're not doing that, we're going to be here next year talking about why are more people leaving, and it's not getting better. People may not want to hear it. It's not just the Waukegan exclusive issue. It's amplified it. It's because, to your point, not only is it our district that's competing, but it's even the districts that are paying more money. It's even the districts whose students don't have as much need, and they are now in that same fight. So we can't abandon the strategy of going overseas and recruiting international teachers. We can't. But we have to also make sure that we're growing our own, and we have to make sure that we are recruiting regionally first, right? Because it's easier to get somebody to come from this area when they live this area, and then also making sure that we are recruiting in the United States. But any place that we can, superintendent, improve the culture and climate, making sure that we're working with those principals, making sure that we're using the data that's referenced in the 5 Essential Survey in order to address systemic issues and even new ones, right? People don't want to feel like they're retaliated against or they should be afraid to come to school. And so we want to make sure that we understand where that's coming from and we put a plan in place in order to address it.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes, of course.
Because you said one of the reasons we're not getting the exit interviews done is because individuals are leaving their work email and their work line as their point of contact. So we're getting notification that they're leaving. Why aren't we double checking that we have a different email to contact them after the fact? Or why aren't they coming in to speak with a neutral party to take down the information and then supply it to the HR office?
Yeah, so I can't speak to that. I know that was one of the takeaways that we came when we identified that problem with Mr. Vukovic's wife. So one of the things
that was how long ago?
2 years.
Okay, that's a
4
problem.
years, Mr. Vukovic?
That's a problem.
No, I'm not saying it's not still happening. I'm saying let's get the report before we die. We don't know,
Okay.
right? We haven't gotten the report. So Mr.
I'm just
Figueroa,
asking into the process and
Yeah.
procedure. That has nothing to do with like the report. It should be a standard procedure on how this is handled when someone leaves the district.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Sorry.
No, that's like I say a point, but that's what we're trying to do. I want to, I guess, when you talk about acknowledging the community, is it's not to say that things are perfect. There are processes and procedures and things that need to be improved in or changed. Some things that you may not know or realize are issue until you dig a little bit deeper. That's also why the board has engaged, we're going through an assessment to make sure where are we successful, SWOT analysis, where do we have weaknesses, where do we have opportunities, and what are some of the threats. So I think the 2 points is getting this year's, exit survey results, and then also getting the evaluation presentation from the assessment that's currently being conducted will provide us further information that we can help make decisions on and make those improvements that you brought up, Ms. Lindsay.
And I'm gonna also wanna add to that, Mr. Ewing, that I'm gonna continue to ask for a staff and student satisfaction survey, district-wide. There's been a reluctance to do it, but that is something that needs to be done so that we can get to the problem. We can get the information and look at the data so that we can find out what is where the staff has satisfaction, unsatisfaction, all of that stuff.
Yeah, and
it has to happen. If it's not, we're just blowing smoke.
So again, I think last time we had this conversation, we do the 5 essentials.
That is so generic.
So what we asked was what specific questions did the board want?
I had them.
I don't remember getting them, Ms. Hannah.
Okay, well, that nothing but a push the button call.
So
scene.
push the button,
we'll
call
just have
scene. Yep.
a detailed view on it this time
Yeah.
to make sure it's included.
And the 5 essential survey will be, the results will be in district this month. We have not received them yet, right? Maybe are they in yet? Next week?
They're not out yet.
Next
And the
week.
board will be seeing them.
So, thank you. Again, overall, very productive meeting. Thank you, Board of Education. Thank you, community. With that, I'd like a motion to adjourn.
So
Motion.
Motion
Second.
by Mr. Riddle, second by Ms. Gonzalez. All in favor, signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Meeting is adjourned.